Hello everybody! Today we will use our supreme Python skills to automate mass messaging on LinkedIn. Now, if you guys have already tried scraping LinkedIn, y'all know it's not an easy task. However, I am here to simplify it for you so that you will never have to pay for premium or InMail services ever again, because my bot will do it for free. For this tutorial, we will use Selenium once again, but this time it will be much quicker. For this, I've partnered up with Tabnine, which is a really cool AI-powered code completion tool, and with it we will only type 2 or 3 characters, and then Tabnine will suggest us the rest of the command. It is of course available for all popular IDEs, including Pycharm and VScode and my favorite, Jupyter. It has great privacy features and it covers many different programming languages, not just Python. So if you guys want to find out more about Tabnine, navigate to the link in the description of the video and sign up for a free account. And when I say free, I actually mean it. It's free for life, there's no strings attached. That's why I'm so excited to share it with you guys. Okay, let's fill that bot already. Alrighty, so we will begin by installing Tabnine inside our Jupyter notebook. And while I'll be copying my commands from GitHub, I actually have them ready for you guys in the description, so you don't need to go anywhere, just copy and paste them. And you will need to hit enter for the very last line. And boom, we have Tabnine installed and we can run our Jupyter notebook. And once we navigate to a folder of our choice, we will start a brand new notebook by clicking on New and Python 3. To save us some time, we will actually copy all the module imports also from the description of the video, and we will paste them in the first cell and run it with Shift Enter. Once we do that, we can move on with activating Tabnine. All you need to do is press Shift and space, and you got it. Our first command would be initializing our WebDriver. And if you guys are not entirely familiar with WebDriver, where to download it or how to install it, definitely check out my web scraping Instagram with Selenium video, where I explain everything in detail, and the link is also in the description, so you don't need to go very far. So our first command, as I mentioned earlier, would be WebDriver. Oh, cool. Tabnine already knows. And right after the WebDriver command, we specify the browser we would like to use. In my case, that's Chrome. And inside the round brackets, we specify the URL of our WebDriver. In my case, it is saved in this wonderful folder, which we will copy. You see, it's right over here. And we will paste this URL inside a string while switching all the backslashes to slashes and adding the name of the file, which is Chrome driver.exe. And lastly, we will assign it to a variable called driver. And this will basically initialize our automated browser window. In the next line of code, we will open the URL we would like to request. So let's type driver.get, and inside the round brackets, we will specify https linkedin.com. And now if we run this cell with Shift Enter, our browser window will open on the other side of my monitor for some reason. But at least it opened in the right URL address. It's linkedin.com, and we can start scraping. Now the first step with automating any social media actions is to log into our personal account. To do this, we will need to know exactly how those 2 input fields and button look like in terms of code. For this, we will open the developer tools with a right mouse click anywhere along the page and then clicking on inspect. I'm going to enlarge it a bit to make sure everybody sees. Then we will select the arrow button, and with the arrow button pressed, we will click on one of the input fields. And right away, we can see that this is an input field with the name of session key. If we do the exact same for the password input, we can see that this is also an input field, but this time the name equals to session password. Lastly, if we check out the sign in button, we are getting a button element where we can actually select it by 2 factors. We have the sign in text, which we can definitely target. However, what I'm going to target is the type attribute, which has the type of submit. And this is a very standard button across many different HTML forms. That's why it makes a lot of sense to target it by its type. And once we know the attributes of all the DOM elements we would like to interact with, it's time to select them inside our code. We will begin with a username. So we will type username equals driver.find element by XPath. And inside a set of round brackets, we can specify the XPath of our element. In our case, that would be an input field with the name of session key. And we will do the exact same thing for our password. We'll just copy this line of code and we will refactor username to password. And we will also copy password and paste it because the name of this input field is session password and not session key. And once we selected those two inputs, we can go ahead and fill in our personal information inside them. We can do this easily by typing username.send_keys, and inside the round brackets in a string we specify our username. And we'll do the same for the password. We'll type password.send_keys, and this time highly confidential. And last but not least, we'll need to select the sign in button. We can do this by copying one of these lines of code once again and refactoring to submit. And instead of selecting an input field, we'll select a button. And instead of targeting the name attribute, we'll target the type attribute that equals submit. And since the only interaction with this button will be a click event, we can just add it to the end of the line. We'll type .click and then a set of brackets. Now, one other thing that will make lots of sense is to fix my typos. That could have been very embarrassing. And one more thing that we didn't take into account is that every time we are loading a brand new web page, we need to allow enough time for all the elements to load. Otherwise, we might try targeting elements that are still being loaded and therefore they do not exist on a page just yet. We can easily solve it by adding some wait in a few strategic spots. So we will do this right before we select our username and password. We will type time.sleep and we will specify 2 seconds. We will copy this command. We'll paste it right after typing our username and password. We will paste it also after clicking on the submit button because it will also open a brand new web page. And once we do that, we can go ahead and click on sell and run all. Oh my God, Maria, what is wrong with you today with all those typos? Okay, now we need to rerun all the cells. And boom, we are logged into our LinkedIn account. And once we got that out of the way, let's navigate to the LinkedIn page where we can message all our contacts through. To do this, we will just click on the search field, we'll hit enter, we will select people, we will select our first order of connections, and we got it. You can see how easy it is to message each and every one of these contacts. And not only this, we actually have many different pages of contacts. In this tutorial, we will only focus on the first page. In the next one, I will show you how to expand our scraper to target as many pages as you'd like. So let's scroll up and take a look at one of these message elements. We will open our developer tools once again. We will select the arrow button once again, and we will select one of these messages. And even though it shows up as a span element, we are much more interested in its parent button element. And the reason why we focus on the button element and not on the span element is because you cannot interact with spans. And that's why we will focus on its parent element, which is clickable and which will trigger an action if we click it. Now, it is also very easy to see that all the buttons we are interested at will have the exact same text, aka message. So what we'll do inside our code is we will target all the button elements with the text of message. And before we minimize our window, we will copy this URL and we will paste it inside a driver.get command. Since we open a brand new page, we will add some sleep. So let's select all the buttons by typing all underscore buttons equals driver dot find elements by tag name. And it's actually elements, it's not element. And inside the round brackets, we specify the tag name, which is button. But we don't want to click on all the buttons. We only want to click on the message buttons. That's why in the line underneath, we will type message underscore buttons, and this will equal to a list comprehension. And inside this list comprehension, we will only keep button for button in all buttons if and only if button.text equals message. Actually, let's make it message buttons. And before we run our code, let's try to click on the first message button. So I'm going to copy message buttons in the index of 0, and we will try to click on it. Let's see how it goes. So we will click on cell and run all. Boom! It worked! And you guys can probably tell that I've already tested the scraper and it works like a charm. My apologies, Jesse. Cool, now let's have a look at the source code of this page once again, and we will select this write a message text. Uh-oh, this is the most generic HTML element you can ever find. This paragraph doesn't have a class name, it doesn't have an ID, and it has no particular attributes that we can target. How on earth are we supposed to send our message keys into it? And this is actually the very first blocker we encounter. Now there's a very easy way to bypass it. All we need to do is to select all the paragraphs on a page, figure out which one of these paragraphs is the one we're looking for by its index, and then sending our keys to the paragraph in the particular index we found. We can do this by typing some sort of a text in here. Let's say GGGGG, and if we expand this paragraph element, we can see our text is already inside it. So we are not going to close this window, we will just minimize it. And in the very next line of code, we will type paragraphs equals driver find elements by tag name, and in our case the tag name is P. And in the next couple lines we'll figure out exactly which paragraph we need. We can do this with a for loop, so we'll type for P in paragraphs print P dot text. And I'm actually going to add a counter variable. We'll initialize it at 0, and this will help us keep track of the index. So we will print it right above the text. We will write print counter, and in the very end of this for loop, we will increment counter by 1. Cool. Let's run this cell with Shift Enter. And we see that we got lots and lots of different paragraph elements. However, our element is almost at the very end of the list. So I think the best way to go is, instead of targeting index 38 in our paragraphs, we will just target index -5. We'll just count the indices from the end of the list. We can get rid of all these commands, and instead of them we will type print paragraphs in the index of -5. Actually, the text of this element. Sorry guys. And we got the correct text. Awesome. So we know exactly which paragraph we're aiming for. However, if we'll try to send our keys to that paragraph at this stage, we will encounter another blocker. Let me elaborate. We will select this arrow button once again, and this time we will select the div element, who is the parent of our paragraph element. It's actually this guy over here. Now keep a very close look at the class of this element and see what happens to this class as soon as I click on this paragraph. Boom! What just happened? We have just encountered our second blocker. And the keynote here is to pay attention to the isActive keyword, which did not exist before we clicked on the div. So in order to get access to our paragraph element, we first need to click on its parent div element. So what we'll do is we will copy the beginning of the class of this div. We will minimize the browser window, and right after we clicked on the button, we can select our main div. And we will do this again with XPath, because XPath allows us to be a little bit ambiguous. We don't have to specify the full class name. We can specify how the class name begins or certain characters that the class name contains. That's why XPath is the way to go. We will type driver.find element by XPath. We are looking for a div element, and inside the square brackets, we will specify that this element starts with the class of the string we just copied from the developer tools. And then right after we will select it, we will also click on it, which will then give us access to our paragraph element. So we can copy this line of code, can paste it right below, and we will send our message to it by typing paragraphs in the index of -5 dot send underscore keys. And at this point we will just test it, so we'll type testing, and we can obviously delete these 2 lines of code. We don't need them anymore. And just to be on the safe side, we will copy this time sleep command, and we will paste it right below clicking on our message button. So are you guys ready? Let's close our browser window and let's rerun all these cells. Boom. Now let's see how we send these keys and how we minimize this div. So we will open the developer tools. As you can guess, we will select the arrow button once again, and we will see how our send button looks like. Ha! So this looks like a copy-paste situation because this button also has the type of submit, and we've already done that. So we are only left with this close button. So let's have a look. And as I mentioned earlier, we are not interested in SVG elements or in non-interactable elements. We are interested at the button parent element. And a good way to differentiate between this button and any other button on the page is the close conversation window attribute value. So let's go ahead and copy this data control name along with its value. We will minimize the page. We will paste it as a comment right underneath. And let's select this button with an XPath once again. We will type close button equals driver.find element by XPath. And this time we are looking for a button element that starts with, and we will copy the attribute from our comment. We'll add an @ character and paste it. We will separate it with a comma, and then inside a string we will paste the attribute value. And after we do that, of course, we will click on that button. So let's see if it works before we hit on submit. Actually, let's, just so we don't forget about it, let's copy it from this line of code, and we will paste it right before the close button. We'll just keep it as a comment for now. I'm just trying to minimize the amount of people I'll be pissing off with my scraper. So let's go ahead and close our browser window, and let's test if our close button works. We'll click on cell, run all, and we have a typo situation once again. The button that starts with, not start with. And if we rerun this once again, boom, our div just closed. So we are almost ready. Let's turn our code into a for loop that targets each of these message buttons and not just the first one. And as you guys can probably guess, our loop will start here. We will type for I in range from 0 to the length of message buttons, which is our list of buttons. And now we will simply indent the rest of these lines of code with tab, and we will replace index 0 with I, which is our iteration variable that will loop from 0 up until the length of our message buttons. But since I already messaged a bunch of people on that page, I will avoid messaging all of them. I'm just gonna keep it to the last 2 people. So let's say from index 8 up until the length of our message buttons, which is 10. And instead of messaging them with the word testing, I will actually copy a predefined message, just so that people don't think I'm super weird. I'm okay with being a little weird, but super? No. And obviously, we will need to get rid of our submit button, comment, and to actually submit the message. And actually, just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna add 2 more waits. One of them is after we hit the submit button, and the other one is after we close the div. Now we will go ahead and run all these cells, and boom! Welcome to blocker number 3. So if we will close this browser window and we take a look inside our code, we get the element not interactable exception. And this exception doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. All it means is that the LinkedIn people think they can trick us and they can prevent us from automating processes just by raising this stupid error. Now, you guys know me by now. You know that it takes much more than this to prevent me from building my bots. So every time you encounter this type of blocker, make sure you are clicking on the element with JavaScript rather than Python. That's why we will dispose of this click command. And on the very next line of code, we will type driver.execute script. And as the first parameter, we will pass our JavaScript code. That would be arguments in the index of 0.click and a semicolon, while the second parameter would be the element we would like to click on. In our case, that's the close button. And since LinkedIn has already tried tricking us, we will know it might do this again. So instead of using Python for all our click commands, we will use JavaScript. Let's do this. And I forgot to wait one more time right after we are sending our keys to the browser. So we will paste it here. Now let's go ahead and rerun all the cells, sit back and enjoy. No hands. Boom. Boom. Perfect. So 2 of my LinkedIn friends think I'm super weird now. Great. That's exactly what I wanted. And that's pretty much it for part 1. So if you guys want to learn how to message multiple pages of contacts, how to personalize each and every one of these messages, and generally how to make your bot seem more human-like, stay tuned for part 2 of this scraper, and I shall teach you all that wisdom. Now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.